we're going to get started with our next. We all know that the world is changing and the industry is changing with it. This next panel focuses on harnessing innovation and technology in the construction industry to offset workforce needs, upskill current employees and career changers, and engage the best future workforce. Our moderator is Michael Riegel. I met Riegel at the New York Builds on the day that COVID first hit the state of New York. We hit it off right away, and within a couple of days, he agreed to speak at my ill-fated Newark conference that was scheduled for May of 2020. We all know how that turned out. It didn't happen, but I'm delighted that in years of collaboration through both Newark and MCCI, Michael's here with us today. And for those of you who stick around for the Pathway Awards, he will be our keynote as well. Michael is a construction professional turned professional coach, and he'll have the rest of our panel introduce themselves once they're up here. I also wanted to take a moment to he is a panelist. I wanted to apologize for that oversight on our end. Okay, come on up.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. We seem to after Thibault slot, which is, I think, a little unfair. However, you know, the idea of innovation and education and sort of the crossover between the two is really what brings us here today. And I think that it's important for us to look at it from a number of different perspectives. Our panelists are going to introduce themselves, but they're each coming at it from a different angle, and I think that's the important piece. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're going to sort of dive right into the questions. Can you hear me? Nope, you're not on.
Hello, hello.
There you go.
There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Craig Davis. I am the regional lean leader for the Baltimore, DC Baltimore office for DPR. A little bit about me. I've been in construction about 32 years. I came to DPR about 15 years ago, started my lean journey, anyway, just off of LCI, Lean Construction Institute last week, so all pumped up about that. But started my lean journey, about 18 years ago, just why is construction, if anybody's seen productivity in construction, that the U.S. labor statistic, the graph goes down, and whereas all the other industries go up. And I've always asked myself, maybe Thibault was an inspiration before I knew it. Why do we do that? How do we get better? How do we improve ourselves? And so I naturally migrated to the whole lean component, so with innovation. And so anyway.
Hi everyone, I'm Elyse Korsyn. Nice to meet you. I am originally from Seattle. I came to Baltimore to go to Johns Hopkins about 14 years ago, so I guess I just dated myself. And I never left. I love Baltimore now. I love hearing from our keynote speaker about that sense of pride, and so glad to join you today. The last 8 years of my career have been with Stanley Black & Decker, beginning on the product development side, starting in innovation and then going into power tool development and outdoor power tools. Most recently in a role is as Director of Business Development for our construction technology group. So looking into the data that we're ingesting and creating with our power tools and what to do with that to maximize the value proposition to our end users.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Ellie Giles, and I am the founder and CEO of a company called Virtual Apprentice. Virtual Apprentice builds training content to attract, train, and retain individuals in the trades. Our focus is on what we call the middle skills jobs, more than a high school diploma, less than a college degree. So we're really working on that sector as we're developing content. I have over 35 years in education and curriculum design, and then I went on to be the first CEO at WorkSource Montgomery, which is the workforce development entity in Montgomery County, and really realized that there's so much funding going out, so much talent towards training, and yet we still have a skills gap. Why is that? So I thought, let's bring it into that virtual world.
Hello, my name is Elyse Korsyn. I'm a professor of construction engineering and management here on campus in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering in the project management program. I've been involved with the construction technology research and development for the last 36 years, to be exact. My first attention and my first effort was in the functional design and development of robotics for construction way back when. I'm an author of the first book published in the United States called Robotics in Civil Engineering. That was published way back when in 1988. And for the last 28 years, I'm an editor-in-chief of this particular journal. It's called Automation in Construction. And I'm pleased to say that as of this year, according to the Web of Science, it's the most prestigious civil engineering research and development journal in the world, according to Clairvet Analytics, which is a company that tracks all the scientific publications. And I'm glad to know that construction research is finally getting attention that it deserves. I'm also past president of the International Association for Automation and Robotics in Construction.
Wow, I feel a little intimidated. So we know construction is not the same as it was. I started working 35 years ago, wow, it's a long time. Construction is not the same as it was when I first started. It's not the same as it was 20 years ago, but I don't necessarily know that we should necessarily equate change and innovation. So I guess the first question for the panel is, what does innovation really look like, and what does it mean to you within the context of the work that you're doing? Sure.
That's a big question. There's so many aspects of innovation within construction. It could be within a process. It can be from the robotic side. I think most people, when they think of innovation in construction, think of a lot of the computer processes, whether it's BIM or scanning, and the big progress that has been made there. I personally see a big push going into the AI market relative to what that technology can do that will help us merge a lot of the siloed pieces of construction that we have right now, where it's the data that's over here with the what needs to go into the field. So whether that's blending your model with all your specs and drawings, and so that you have it all together. So that's my quick answer.
Yeah, for me, what comes to mind is everybody's new favorite buzzword right now is big data, Internet of Things. I think we can all agree there's no lack of data out there, but from the perspective of a tool manufacturer, it's not enough anymore to ask people if they want data. Everyone will tell you yes, but when you ask what they're going to do with that data, it's a little bit more unclear. And for that reason, it's really been a privilege of the top biggest contractors who have a whole team of software developers to make sense of that data and make it meaningful. And I think us as an industry, the next round of innovation is going to be making that data more actionable. Another buzzword that's going around is prescriptive analytics. So not predictive, but prescriptive, telling you what to do about this data. While it's been a privilege of the big companies so far, data is quickly becoming democratized. There's a metaphor that I use so often that I keep this comic on my desktop so I can screen share it during a meeting. And it's a bunch of people pushing a cart on square wheels, and somebody's holding a round wheel. And they said, hey, do you want this? And everyone goes, no, we don't have time. And that tends to be how some people think about construction technology. I don't have time. I don't have money for that software. I would argue that you don't have time to not consider it anymore. And I'll leave you with a this long-winded answer with one concrete example, and it's literally concrete. Concrete sensors and connected anchors have been around for a few years. There's a value proposition there, but the next step and the next true innovation is going to be upstream and downstream integration. So imagine that now you know, not only do you have that data, if you're not familiar with, these are sensors, strain gauges, and temperature that communicate to a local network or the cloud. Not only do you have that data, but you know where that sensor is, and you know where it is relative to your model, your BIM or your Revit model. And then you take it one step further, and you know where that data exists relative to the design and relative to your schedule. So if your concrete slab is going to be done curing 10 hours ahead of schedule, you can call in your next round of subs and be 10 hours ahead of schedule, and I don't need to tell you how valuable that is. And so I think the onus is really on all of these companies creating all this data to make it make sense and communicate that value proposition to our contractors. And I'm really excited to see where that goes.
So I'm going to just piggyback on some of the things you're saying. So what is innovation is what the question is. So I'm going to tell you what it's not. Innovation is not doing something just because. It answers a question. That's what innovation does. We have an inefficiency and we want to fix that inefficiency. That's when innovation comes along. There's a lot of stuff that's come along that hasn't gone anywhere because it didn't answer a problem. So we look at apprenticeships, which is a great model, and nothing's going to replace that opportunity to be in the field and have somebody who really is an expert at it stand next to them. But there are things to do to build competencies faster so that when we get people in, they've mitigated their risk, they're not utilizing materials that are consumable, and still come out as highly competent as they would be working with a master in their field. So I look at innovation as a way of answering and solving a problem, not just to be there. And that's not how I would answer it.
I couldn't agree more. I also believe that innovation is asking the right questions. There's a lot of interesting questions you can ask, a lot of challenging questions, but the ones that everybody's losing sleep over, you cannot wait until you get the answers to this question, to these particular questions. And in the process, you generate new knowledge that didn't exist before. And you put that knowledge into practical use. Once you do that, then you can make a big difference for the construction industry. Everybody knows about this paradigm called Construction 4.0, where we try to harness the power of various technologies, AI, sensor-based systems, of course, automation, robotics, but there are newcomers to this realm. And it's, for example, blockchain technology. That's the engine behind cryptocurrencies that is now being tried in the application of so-called smart contracts. There's very little knowledge in the construction industry about what that really means, what kind of revolution it can create, the way that we manage contracts for design and construction, and what are the implications for construction integration. We just wrote part of a book focused on Construction 4.0 that talks about the integration of blockchain technology and BIM, building information models. What are the implications of that? I just got back from a trip to 3 different countries, Portugal, Norway, and Turkey, and we talked about the new paradigm called Construction 5.0. And 5.0 is using all the power of Construction 4.0 and focusing on particular objectives that 4.0 did not tackle so far, and that's sustainability and resilience. And this is a very exciting topic to a lot of people in the industry, but very little is known about. So innovation is really putting these ideas together in service of these objectives that are really important for our industry.
So Craig, you had mentioned the graph, and we had a call earlier this week, the productivity graph post-World War II. And construction is basically a flat line. It even dips down a little bit.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we are very much a people industry, and we want to focus on productivity. Can you share an opinion as to why that has happened, and perhaps 1 or 2 things that we can start to think about in terms of bending the curve?
Gosh, there's a loaded question.
I only ask the hard ones.
For one, I don't want to get into we have a skills gap. We've all kind of talked about that, where there's less people going into the industry than we need. We need skilled people. And if you've ever met Mike Rowe or seen what he's got a great thing on the skills gap. I'll just leave him speak for me on that one. I think when it comes to innovation, and we were talking it as a panel, one of the things that we see coming up is a robot's not going to replace a human right away. There's going to be an intermediate step. There's going to be a need for somebody to service the robot or help that robot assist the construction side, and there's going to be a need for that worker to join the workplace along with the plumber and the electrician as well. So there's that part of it too. And then just to even piggyback what Thibaut was saying about, I think as a whole, just how we approach the learning, how we're teaching and getting those people into the workplace, the whole education system. I think we really need to look at how we're doing that, because from my experience, everybody wants to go into the programming of there's for some reason it's more valuable to be the programmer than it is the plumber or the technician. And how do we not glorify that, but how do we say they're on the same plane, and there's value in this just as much as there is in this, because we all need it. We all need it to survive.
So I'm going to throw it to Ellie, because Ellie is you come at it from an education perspective, and you've made the transition from education into sort of the commercial world of bringing an application to the industry. How do we start to bridge that education skills gap?
So, I mean, I think it starts by talking about what is individual's purpose, for our previous speaker. So when I meet with young folks and people who are just beginning to get into their career, they really do want to add value. That's really what their motivation is. Very rarely do I hear, I want to be rich. I want to tell you, you think money is the motivator, but it's not. They want to add value. And so I think where it starts is to show how all of the careers in the trades do add value. They are the unsung heroes, and we know that. And so I think that's where we start, is by helping people find that purpose and understanding there's a lot of myths that circulate around the trades, unfortunately, and we've got to break those myths. And so that's one of the reasons why we started looking at what was cool technology that would have a young person get in there and try it and say, this is awesome. And that's why we went into utilizing the virtual. We talked earlier, the speaker before, about how education is not really reaching kids. That's really why I went into bringing in this innovation. I wasn't able to reach kids by telling them, look at this, go to this career fair, see what this is all about, talk to a master mechanic, a master tradesman, a journeyman, talk to them and find out how cool their job is. They weren't willing to invest that. They needed to learn by doing and experiencing it. So that's really how I came into that transition, understanding what a learner needs and what the processing is, understanding the demands of the workforce after running a workforce development board. I needed to merge those two skills together.
And Elyse, you come at this from sort of the tool perspective, right? So when you start to think about it from that angle, right? How do we start to not do the same things over and over again, and not make changes just for the sake of change, but for the purpose of moving the industry forward, whether it's from a productivity perspective or higher use or something along those lines?
Yeah, that was louder. I really appreciate the question. I think, is that just me? So the opportunity to improve productivity from power tools is what I've been living and breathing for the last 8 years, right? It's how do we make people's jobs easier? How do we make them faster? The most recent focus has been on tracking of those tools. If you work with somebody, or if you work in a company that owns your own tools or rents them out to your people, and you haven't asked recently how much time they spend walking around the job site looking for lost tools, or if you haven't looked into your budget as to how many lost tools you've replaced and then they get found a few weeks later, you should probably go in and do that audit. That's been, I think, one of the major opportunities for productivity in the space. There's a lot of solutions out there between Bluetooth, RFID, good old barcodes, and a lot of software platforms. And I'll leave you to choose those best solutions, but if you have questions, feel free to ask me. And there's so much opportunity to making sure that the right tool is in the right place at the right time, optimizing the location of your tool crib, being able to go and recover those tools. The technology is still developing. It's still a lot of manual labor right now. Again, it's the square wheel and the round wheel. It takes some investment to get it up and running. I've heard folks tell me they don't have the resources to hire a full-time tool crib manager, but you've got somebody trying to do it off the side of their desk, and they're spending half the day on the phone with a foreman trying to track down if the tool ever arrived at the job site. And if you would have just ponied up to begin with, then you would know exactly where that tool is. And so I would just challenge everybody to go out and do your own, ROI calculations and figure out what it means to you. And if that bar is still too high today, we're going to see technology costs continue to decrease, and some of those are going to become a lot more affordable moving forward.
Great. And Professor, you've been in this field for a very long time, and we've heard a lot about different career paths, and you get a certain group that are coming through a collegiate path into the construction industry. How have you seen the approach to teaching them change, and where are we missing some of the mark on those people who are coming out of those programs?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and if I had the whole day, I could probably elaborate on the subject. But in a nutshell, from the academic perspective, construction education in highly prestigious research-intense universities such as this campus, in my humble opinion, does not get adequate attention and adequate prestige. And there are a couple of reasons for it. One is most other branches of industry that are associated with various technical specialties in the engineering school, in the Clark School of Engineering here on campus, enjoy a tremendous amount of collaboration with corporations, with companies. This is not the case when it comes to construction education and research. Construction companies, historically, traditionally, have done very little, next to nothing, in terms of investing in research and development, which is absolutely necessary for teachers, for faculty, to flourish in an academic environment. So hence my appeal to those of you who can be in a decision-making mode as to whether to invest or not to invest in construction innovation on university campuses, where we educate the new generation that will enter the workforce in the construction industry. So in an academic environment such as ours here, teachers are not allowed, are not even permitted to simply regurgitate old knowledge that has been created elsewhere and imparting it on students. Teachers in the construction, engineering, and management programs must be also active in creating new knowledge and then imparting this, transferring that knowledge to the classroom. In order to create new knowledge, we need the resources, and those resources are then used very creatively to support this research, support the new generation of researchers and developers who will come up with new technologies and new technical solutions that will be in turn transferred to industry. So we need to do that, and we need to make sure that the construction education gets the recognition that it needs. To give you an example, the largest benefactor to this university campus that has donated hundreds of millions of dollars to various causes at this university has made his money in the construction business. I think you know whom I'm talking about. Yet, the fact that this is really a construction tycoon, bless his soul, he's passed away, of course, is never ever mentioned in the context of philanthropic giving, and in the context of support of research and development at this university. All the attention is being given to nanotechnologies, biotechnologies, anything that has to do with healthcare, systems delivery, whatever else, except construction. Construction is never mentioned. This got to change in order for us to move forward to make a qualitative and quantitative change in how we deliver construction education. So traditionally, construction has had this low-tech image. We're trying to change that through a variety of avenues, and attracting young generation to construction education has to be done through research and development. Young people really get hooked up on applications of new technologies. There's a lot of show and tell. I teach a class on construction automation and robotics for University of Maryland students. And we get students, in fact, a lot of students actually join the class online because they're in other parts of the country. Some are in California, some are in Canada, some are even as far away as Japan or Dubai, you name it. They're all over the place. We get military officers also join this particular course. And it's really through educational efforts like that that are propelled by research and development that we do ourselves here on this campus, that the transformative change is taking place.
I just want to add, construction is part of STEM. And that's the other piece of it. Nobody thinks of construction as part of STEM. It's part of STEM.
Absolutely.
Amen. So I know we've heard a lot today about recruiting people into the industry, getting upstream, trying to capture students' interest as early as middle school and into high school, and some of those approaches. I will throw this out to anybody who wants to offer an opinion about your thoughts on innovative approaches to recruiting talent, and how do we consider the practicality of transferable skills from other industries? Anybody can?
I can actually reverse this question, because traditionally, it was the construction industry that was the recipient of innovative technologies from automotive industry, from nuclear power industry, Air Force, military applications that trickled down to the construction business. Anything that runs GPS-based location systems. Actually, the GPS, I don't know how many of you realize or remember that was developed here in Maryland at the Applied Physics Laboratory in Clarksville in the 1960s, initially for US Navy applications. And imagine your mobile phone or your car without the GPS. It makes your job so much more difficult. So imagine this, we in construction are in the business of creating a perfect prototype first time around. We're not permitted second chances. The building that we are creating in the design process and then through construction and then we operate that building has to be perfect first time around. The automotive industry goes through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different versions of the prototype before that car is put into mass production. And then you have recalls because they made mistakes. In construction, we have mastered to perfection the production of a perfect prototype first time around. Now that knowledge is very valuable and it could be transferred to other branches of industry. That would boost our image as a high-tech industry. And this has never happened. This has hardly ever been talked about. Of course, we've benefited through a lot of technologies that were transferred to construction. One of these pictures here is from Boston Dynamics. I'm sure most everybody has seen those cool videos of the Spot robot and other robots making saltos and flip-flops through all sorts of videos that you can find on the internet. There are construction companies, I'm not sure if DPR is one of them, that's experimenting with Spot Robot, carrying tools and actually surveying construction sites. There are many applications like that. Before the pandemic, I traveled to China a lot. The Chinese construction industry is now by far larger than ours here in the US. Just one number that sticks in my head, the mileage of high-speed rail in China is 10 times bigger than in Japan at this point in time. And the infrastructure that they've put together over the last 10, 15 years puts the rest of the world to shame. So there is a lot of opportunities for technology transfer, but construction companies are almost completely absent from all these events that creatively talk about generating new solutions for the construction industry using high-tech innovation. And just to give you an example, I'm a chairman of the scientific committee of a conference called the Creative Construction Conference. We've been trying to attract Bob Ajdukovic, who was the previous leader of this organization, has actually traveled to one of these conferences with us, and he saw with his own eyes as to what wonderful ideas can come up with in the course of discussions between academics and industry practitioners in relaxed settings, such as those conferences. We have an annual international symposium on automation and robotics in construction that started in Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania way back when in 1984, and it runs annually. And yet almost nobody in the construction industry in the United States is interested in participating in those events. There are lots of conferences like that. Anyone who's interested, please let me know. I'll send you a long list of things that you can do. You can actually go to beautiful places in the world, combine that with vacation, take your family, and be inspired with new ideas, what you can do when you come back home and come back to your office and brainstorm on what the technology can really do for your company.
And any other thoughts?
Yeah, I have a challenge for everyone. So we have a situation in Ukraine. Eventually, we're going to have to rebuild Ukraine. How are we going to do that with supply chain problems, with the weather being so terrible? There are some big hurdles that's going to happen when it's time for Ukraine to be rebuilt. So we were looking at transfers of skills and the creativity. Think of all those kinds of challenges that are happening as we're looking at that situation. You guys do that every day. I think that's what happens is we have to think, here's a building, here's a different foundation, you come up with the solution. Let's take a look at it from that perspective. I serve on a committee with NIST that is being charged with coming up with ideas on when to be ready for the infrastructure when that time comes to help with the rebuild. And right now, all the discussion is on 3D printers, taking everything that's been blown up, feed it back into a 3D printer to make it into usable construction materials. So, these are the kinds of things that when you talk about transfer and attract, I think looking at it from that problem-solving, creative response and not at the lockstep of what it is to build something, but what it is to build something within that big picture really helps.
Speaking of 3D printing, there are about half a dozen companies here in the United States that are pursuing this technology very actively. There is even a conference that is organized exclusively on the topic of 3D printing in construction. Chinese companies, many European companies are extremely active in the area. Anyone interested, I have an hour-long presentation on what the technology can do, and I encourage you to find out more.
Gosh, this is such a big topic. Let me start with, yes, we do mess around with robotics. We've messed around with exoskeletons for almost like if those of you are familiar with the Aliens, when Sigourney Weaver gets into that robot and starts picking things up. There are exoskeletons that are out there that help the worker, to help them pick up as much as 800 pounds by themselves. There's mechanically assisted, there's ergonomically assisted. when I first came to DPR, we were messing around with what we called it Laybot at the time, but now it's commercially out as Dusty. At the time, interestingly enough, we had all the technology to do what we needed to do. Where we really got what stumped on was how do we put the mark on the floor and not have the Sharpie run out. That was really the big problem with how to mark. It was how to mark the floor. It was not how to lay the layout out. It was, so you start getting into it. Innovation opens so many other doors. From a lean perspective, for me, I think a lot of it really is getting back to how do we get people in, is how do we groom that, and this goes bigger into the whole education. How do we cultivate that desire to learn? I don't, sometimes when I get an engineer, I don't care whether they're a history major or an English major or engineering major. If they have the desire to learn, I can teach them anything. The world's their oyster. They can end up going into structures. They can go into robotics. They can go into laser scanning. But how do we cultivate that need to learn, that want to learn, that passion, and then let them be their own kind of person, and let that I think that's kind of the bigger question, and it's a BHAG, if you will. So I don't know if I really answered the question. But
well, I guess so. I'll throw it out as a follow-up. You know, if we're looking to, right, we know there's going to be a deficit in labor. No matter how much innovation we bring in, no matter how much technology we bring in, we know there's still going to be a deficit of labor. How do we get beyond the four corners of a resume or a job description and start to say, right, we don't need X, Y, and Z, but we need critically these skills? I may have stumped the panel here.
How do we do that? There are creative solutions that one can apply, and that doesn't speak directly to needs of a particular project, but as far as development of a technology, I remember years ago when I was a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, we were working on legged locomotion for construction machinery and equipment, and we didn't know much about legged locomotion. We knew about tracked locomotion, wheeled locomotions, those omnidirectional wheels that make the machine go sideways or in any direction you want. But when we wanted to learn about legged locomotion, we hired an entomologist who was a specialist in cockroaches. It turns out that the cockroach has the most efficient legged locomotion biologically developed solution, of course, through millions of years of evolution. A cockroach can lose half of its legs and still run as fast as it does with all of its legs. So how do we take advantage of that knowledge that nature has already put on the silver table for us? Go take it, use it. We just completely ignored it over the years. So sometimes the solutions to problems that we face are available from maybe very surprising sources. I worked at one time with colleagues at Harvard who were interested in swarm intelligence, and they were experimenting with micro-robotics, trying to mimic the way that termites build their hives. And how do they do that? Termites, a single termite is not a very intelligent creature, but as a group, they exhibit levels of intelligence that surpass intelligence of most of mammals, not humans, of course, but most of other mammals. And what are the lessons learned that we can derive from swarm intelligence in the way that we build our own structures? It turns out that creatures such as those insects, they bypass the design process. Nobody worries about design. One elementary motion leads to another. The next creature knows what to do. And all of a sudden, before you know, the structure is built. Are there any implications for us as humans, the way that we conduct our own projects? Nobody knows yet, but at least it's an intriguing thought that inspires new directions of thinking.
I'd love to provide a very ground level perspective on this. So I've been very deliberate with my word choice today. I said I spent the last 8 years working at Stanley Black & Decker. I'm currently in the very exciting part of my career where all of the opportunities exist in front of me. And anybody who's smiling knows what I'm talking about. I'm on the job search. And let me tell you, very functionally, I've had the privilege of having a large network and talking to a lot of hiring managers who have really cool openings. But you go online and you look for those listings and they're not even sure what the requisition number is. They're not even sure which job description it is because they're all so generic. I don't know which of those positions is mine, and none of them sound like the thing that was described to me on the phone. And so just being very pragmatic about what training do you need to have, and what would you like to have, and what are you willing to provide? Because you might be missing candidates who don't already have that training, but maybe you're willing to give it to them, and just putting it plainly on paper. I've hired many people, and I've gotten a lot of those emails of, hey, I'm not sure where we're at in the process, where are we? And now I'm experiencing it from the outside, and sure enough, it's a giant black box. So if we're talking about recruitment, first of all, you can start by hiring me, and then you can go on and make sure all your job descriptions are as attractive as possible.
So I guess the natural follow-up is, have we allowed technology to make us less open to bringing people into the industry? Right, I haven't had to send in a resume for quite a while. If you send in a resume now, it's like it's a computer that scans your resume for keywords. Now, if I want somebody to work on my project, I don't need keywords. I need to know, can they actually do the job, right? So the question is, have we gone over the edge in terms of using technology to try and make it easier to find people?
So it's a great question. So I really believe that when we look at technology and the uses of it, to have something for a keyword as a way of scanning out, step one, not end step. So I think what you need to do is look at how technology is going to deal with within the process. Earlier you asked about the four corners of a resume. A resume is your journey. It is not your final destination. So I think that's what we really have to help kids. So they did, when I was growing up, and I'm a lot older than everybody in this room, I can tell you, we used to do the career ladder. There's no such thing. There's a career lattice, you move from place to place to place, you continue to grow. I did the same thing growing. I've been a teacher, I've been the head of economic development, I've been the head of workforce development, and then at a very advanced age, I won't tell you my age, I started my own company. So that is a journey, and that's the exciting part about workforce and growing. And so I think we've just got to get away from that paradigm that it is a destination. It's never a destination.
Did you want to say something?
I was going to say, I really appreciate summer internships, or when we go into the high schools to really kind of talk about getting future either superintendents or field engineers, or even some of the people that help out with the on the accounting side, and just let them see that there is something. Construction is much more than the guy in the backhoe digging the ditch. Right, there are so many opportunities within it, and it's not just you're going to be dirty every day, right? There's an insurance side to it, there's an accounting side to it, there's a marketing side to it, there's an engineering side to it. There's so much more that's there. I think we've kind of maybe dovetailing into you. I'd love to see a lot more apprenticeship kind of things come together, because I think that's really. The other byproduct of that is you get to really see the individual. It's not, the resume is just a one snapshot in time, but if you've got a 5-week program where you can do a summer internship with somebody, not only do they get to know you as a company, you get to know them as a person, and then you can the world's your oyster. You can really develop anybody from that point moving forward.
So here's, and I'm going to direct this question to Elyse, because you had mentioned you worked for Stanley Black & Decker. I'm old enough to remember when there was a Stanley and a Black & Decker. So we've seen a lot of consolidation in the industry, whether that is firms doing the work, whether that is tool manufacturers, right? A lot of consolidation, firms getting bigger. Can you offer an opinion on, does that stymie innovation in any ways?
Yeah, you can tell how long someone's lived in Baltimore if they say Black & Decker or Stanley Black & Decker, pre-merger, after merger. Yeah, so it's interesting from a mechanical engineering perspective. I find it fascinating because the world really opens up in terms of the different price points, how much money you have to spend on this product and the different features and leveraging those across your brand. So I would say in terms of innovation, it has certainly opened up a lot of doors when you can share IP across different brands. And in case you're not familiar, Stanley Black & Decker, it's not just those two brands, but it's DeWalt and Porter Cable and Bostitch and Proto and Mac and Craftsman and MTD and Cub Cadet, and I don't need to go on, right? And I've had so many fascinating calls with people in oil and gas in Portland about a new sensor technology that we can use in our nailers. And so there's a lot of benefit to that, and the customer gets a better product. Now, where you see a little bit of a bottleneck is at distribution, because 9 times out of 10, the tool that somebody's going to buy is the one that's on the shelf. And we really haven't seen the same revolution in technology at the distribution layer. I'm not going to say any names, but you walk into any given tool place, and mostly you're limited to the selection you see there in front of you. There's no e-com, there's no comparison across tools, and people don't very frequently reevaluate their tool purchasing programs to really know what is effective. And these new robotics and other categories of technologies that haven't traditionally come from your top 5 tool manufacturers are upsetting that a little bit, right, in the way that we sell to the end users. But I would say that overall it's a good thing for the consumer, being able to leverage that technology, but that you just have to be careful, and you have to be very proactive at the distribution level to make sure that you're really making the best use of the technology that is available.
Craig, I'll sort of follow up with you a little bit, right? So you're on the implementation side, right? And from your experience, right, you and I have been in the industry probably about the same amount of time. What's your view on things in terms of companies getting bigger and them becoming more difficult to introduce innovation?
It's either that or they get stuck in one avenue where companies merge and then they stick to what more people in the company are doing, right? It becomes a monetary proposition because the company can't sustain doing two different things. It's kind of tough. One of the struggles we have at DPR, we have a mantra. It's called Ever Forward, right? And so we are usually one of the first contractors to embrace something new that's out there. That comes with a price tag. Not everybody can do that. It also comes to the benefit because we can become more flexible, and we can ride that first wave and see where we're going to go relative to where it goes from there. Your average $7 million a year general contracting firm can't do that. They can't go into and have those conversations with Autodesk and say, here's what we want to do it. I was on a phone call with Oracle, and they're in the process of P6 is Primavera, and they're in a process of revamping Primavera to put in a last planner program, which is a lean pull planning module. And I had been talking to them. Okay, well, that's cool. What are you doing about tact planning? And they were stumped because they're so big they can't move out of their own way. So they can only produce at that. They can only innovate at that track level. You can't become, when you're that big, you're not flexible. So the question is how do you grow and still be flexible? It is kind of it is a paradox. And I don't know the answer to it. And I know it's something that companies, whatever level it is, struggle with. and on how you do that. How much money should I put into my computer system this year? Or how much money should I be training my guys to do this year so that it hits that bell curve for me to maximize my profits or my company?
Yeah, I can add to that. When before my my move to the University of Maryland, I spent 20 years at Purdue. And at Purdue, we had a slightly different model of educating future workforce for the construction industry. At Purdue, they admit the student into a construction engineering and management program only when the student receives a sponsorship for a period of 4 years by a particular construction firm. And that firm becomes the sponsor of all consecutive summer internships, 30 weeks in total, every summer for 10 weeks. And the student actually goes through different departments in the company, learns the ropes in various aspects of the construction business. At Maryland and in some other institutions here on the East Coast, there is a slightly different approach. We tend to stay away from educating students in particular tools, whether being P6, that was, of course, Primavera was acquired by Oracle, but you know, Tekla was acquired by Trimble. Trimble actually grew by leaps and bounds through mergers and acquisitions as well. There was a point in time they were buying up about 20 companies per year, kind of integrating upstream and downstream activities. We see that sea of change in the industry, in the technology, that we no longer want to train students in particular tools, because tools come and go. Eventually, a tool that is very hot today is going to become obsolete within 5 years or so. So we'd rather focus on problem-solving skills, on communication skills. So we give those generic tools to students who become very quick learners once they come to the reality of a job site. So we'd rather do that and turn over a student like that, a graduate, to a company, and assure the company that this particular young person is going to be a quick learner. So whatever you want him or her to learn, they're going to do it very quickly, and they will lead the innovation for you because they've developed critical thinking skills.
Yeah, I would agree. Having somebody be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody and say, "This is my problem, help me out, how do you figure it out?" is a much better skill than I can drive P6, right?
Or I can send a text message.
Exactly.
or email.
Exactly.
Ellie, I'm going to direct this to you because we all work with and for organizations that maybe are a little resistant to adopt new approaches, right? You've got a new approach. What's the story you think that organization or the people you're dealing with are telling themselves that is creating that resistance?
So I can only tell from my experiences when I started with Virtual Apprentice, but we started, I was haunted with this idea. You know, as a speaker before said, you couldn't stop thinking about it. That was the same thing for me. I thought, I've got to bring technology into training. So I made the courageous decision of just quitting my job on the March of 2020. And then the world shut down, right? So I started this company, so excited, and then we had COVID. So my big joke is, instead of having a soft launch, we had a cough launch. But see, then I couldn't get people to put this on their face. Who's going to put a goggle on their face during the middle of COVID? So I really had to do a listening tour, and it was such a gift to me. Where are your pain points? Let me program for your pain points. And I did realize when I started that what advantage COVID would be, but not only did I hear where the pain points were in training and what kinds of competencies they were looking for, and the critical thinking skills and the practicality, but also what kind of data shows that you're competent. Everybody had a different answer to that. So being able to build in different measurements into the VR to address people's pain points was really critical for me. So I think what we have to do is to have somebody build innovation is you really have to show that this is going to be a benefit to them. And the way you show it being a benefit to them is that we only do customized work. We meet each client where their needs are. And I think that that makes a big difference. Not to plug my company, but.
No, not at all. So I know we have just a couple more minutes, and I want to leave a few minutes for some questions. And I'm going to ask you to be brief on this answer because it's a very big question. What does the future look like for us? Anybody can go.
I'm going to say robots, and then I'll just leave.
Augmented reality.
Yeah, I think, we start with the word infrastructure, right? That is what the future holds for us. It is the focus now. Everything we talk about is in supporting infrastructure. How do we support infrastructure? Let's take a look at the technology and how does that fit into the puzzle?
Building extraterrestrial structures on the moon and Mars, especially on the moon, using robots and 3D printers to bring helium-3 to Earth as an extremely efficient and perfectly clean fuel that's going to solve the energy problem for the rest of the world.
Okay. So is there something?
No, I was going to add, just real quick, if you hadn't seen, everybody knows Elon Musk bought Twitter, but the day that he put the first offer out there, he was on a TED Talk with in Vancouver. And he said something that blew my mind to kind of say, he does not look at Tesla as an automobile company. He sees Tesla as an AI company, right? And when you understand that it's all about the software, that's what Elon is all about, you can kind of see where he's headed as one of the leaders in our world, right? And it's not about Tesla and SpaceX are little hobby farms for him. It's about the software and what it's going to go into next. So anyway, that's why I said robots.
Okay. Any questions? We have a couple minutes left. Yeah.
I am an apprentice right now. I'm currently going through ABC apprenticeship, and there's been a lot of talk about education for construction and wanting to kind of shed more light on the education for construction. But I'm curious if there's any effort to try and improve upon some of the programs that we have. As someone who's going through the apprenticeship right now, and I also got a Bachelor of Science in biology from Towson, and I used to be a middle school science teacher. I can really see a lot of the disparities in the programs, and I have ideas for how to improve that. But I think part of the reason why we might have a problem with construction education not being respected is because I don't know if some of our apprenticeship programs are quite as beefy as they claim to be.
I forgot to mention that I was on the board at ABC in Baltimore for about 9 years. And Mike's not here to jump in. That space that you're being trained in has been a big dream for a lot of us for a long time, and we're not done yet. There's such a gap there that we need to fill for training our folks. For whatever reason, the world's given up on VOTech and that skills gap kind of thing. And I don't know that I can answer your question other than just say I applaud you, and it's such a need. Again, it kind of goes back to I really think the challenge is as we go into how do we educate our future kids, and I struggle with my kids is how do you again get back to that knowledge of learning. It could be whether it's nursing, whether it's electrical, whether it's how does an elevator work, or just riding, how does a backhoe work. Getting that passion for learning I think is the biggest thing you can cultivate. The rest of it, we have the luxury of this thing called the internet, and there's so much more there that you can broaden your skills with. But really cultivating that part of it, I think, is really important. So anyway.
So I'm just going to answer that from an educator, teacher to teacher. We know when you learn, there's 3 phases: acquisition, application, generalization. And when we teach, we try to teach to all of that. You get the information, you practice the information, and you apply the information. We need to move away from the acquisition. We need to move away right away. It's a button away, as you were saying, and really start to emphasize the application and generalization. And that's where I think we need to move, especially in apprenticeships.
And that also reflects a new educational approach in some institutions, including some of my own classes, where we talk about so-called flipped classroom, where students actually acquire the material, the knowledge themselves, they share it among themselves, and the student becomes a teacher at the same time as he or she is learning the new skills and new information. If I heard you right, you got a degree in biology. I commend you for moving into construction. I know one person that has degrees in fields that are far away from construction, in law, in history, and in medicine. And that person has become a tycoon in the construction industry and has every construction innovation award that there exists. And recently he was honored in DC by American Society of Civil Engineers for being the champion of technology transfer from research and development to industry practice. One of the inventions that he made was circular reinforcement for reinforced concrete columns, but there are many others. He has numerous awards in prefabrication, in automation of various aspects of the construction process. So the fact that you have a degree in an area that seems to be far away from construction is actually a very strong asset. I'd encourage you to actually talk to many of your peers with similar backgrounds to attract them to the construction industry, because you bring in a whole different perspective.
And the one thing I will add from my perspective is we probably don't lean heavily enough on topics like critical thinking, problem solving, communications, because you've got a biology degree. If you can think critically and you can solve problems, you've already demonstrated that you have the capacity to learn, right? I can bring you into construction and I can teach you what you need to. I can't teach you coming through the door how to think critically, right? But if you've acquired, right, if we're building that into our educational skill set, right, we can leverage individuals who can do those basic things. And I don't want to say that they're basic or that they're easy, but if we can leverage things like critical thinking and problem solving, we can bring tons of people into this industry because they can learn, they can figure out how to integrate, and you teach them the skills they need. And I think that's it.